Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Mean Stack series. And my name is Coding with Court, and we're going to continue with our server today. Just to kind of update you guys on some things. I apologize for not posting videos on a regular basis. I actually just recently got hired to a new job last month, so most of my time has been invested and learning my new software engineering role with a new company, which is why I haven't been posting new videos. But I'm really excited to actually get into what we're going to be talking about today, which is test-driven development, which is something that I've always really wanted to get into, but haven't had the chance. But with this new job, that's all my new company does, is everything we do is test-driven development. Now, if you're not too familiar with what that means, is that it basically means with test-driven development is instead of writing your code kind of out of the box, which is what I've been doing, you actually write your tests first and then you come and write your code. Now, with the current state of our Express server, we don't have a testing framework that we can use to write tests. And some of these routes that we've written, actually none of these have tests, and I want to kind of change our approach with this project, and I want to do something similar to that, because test-driven development, from what I've been able to experience so far with little time at my new job, is that it writes really clean code. It does take longer, but part of test-driven development is knowing that your code is running properly. It gives you some level of confidence. Whereas with the approach I've been taking, you have to test things manually, and you're not always sure if things are going to work out or not the way you want them to. Whereas tests kind of give you some level of confidence that your code is working the way it should. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're kind of just going to go through our folder structure here, and I'm going to start changing some things around because, like I said, this new job, I've just figured out a lot of different things that they do that I really enjoy. And so what we're actually going to do is I'm going to check out of a new branch. I'm going to call it setup, feature setup test environment. Okay, so I actually want to come over here and show you guys. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to write this new issue and kind of give us an idea of what we need to do for our approach. So the first thing we want to do is install Mocha, Chai, and Supertest. And I'll get into what these guys actually do, but we do need them. So the first thing we want to do is install these guys. And then after that, we want to restructure our project. Really just our folder structure is what needs to change. And let's write our first test. And then, well, really add test coverage to existing routes. I think this is a good place to start for today, and we'll see how far we get. I hope you guys are excited for this, because I know I definitely am. It's definitely a different way of thinking in terms of software development, and I've really learned to enjoy it. So I'm going to go ahead and start installing some of our dependencies that we're going to need. So I'm going to say npm I, stands for install, and we're going to have Chai, Supertest, and Mocha, and we're going to save these. Well, actually, let's save them as dev dependencies. So Node is just gonna install these for us by checking npm, and we can go verify that these got installed, which they did, which is perfect. It's what we want. Now here we actually have an npm run test, which this isn't going to do anything, but let's just go ahead and run it, see what it does. Right, so it did what we thought it was going to do. Didn't really do anything, just showed some error and exit 1. But what we want to do is, so we completed our first step on our issue. So I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and commit. So we have these. So another thing, I've been learning how to name my commits better. So with my new job, we have we used a software to kind of track tickets. And so normally what we do is we put our ticket number. So mine is, if you look at my issue, it's number 5. So I could say like issue number 5, installing, I'd say adding chai, Mocha, and Supertest as dev dependencies. And I could save that. Alright, so it looks like that added a bunch of stuff to our package lock, which is fine. Alright, so let's go ahead and start restructuring this, because I've been kind of messing around on my own time, restructuring some of my other Express projects. And what I think I would like to do is make a source directory here. What I want to do is I want to move the server.js inside of the source directory. And then I also want to move the routes directory in the source. So now I've kind of moved things to this structure. And let's go ahead and do a little bit more. So this is all database stuff. And I kind of want to move these guys into a database directory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a DB directory. And I'm just going to go ahead and move my models and the DB. And I'm also going to move my config db.js into DB. Alright, I'm actually going to delete this config directory because there's nothing I need from it. So I'm going to use the remove force flag, or the recursive remove force flag. Not that I need the recursive part, but so that's deleted. Some of these got moved around. So let's see if my, okay, so let's go look at our changes. Okay, so this all looks fine to me. Look in here, looks fine. Really, I'm looking to make sure the paths got updated. So this didn't get updated. So it should now be db/db. And actually, I don't like how that looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename db.js into config.js. It's my database config file. So config /routes. Now these actually shouldn't have changed. So .. would put me here. Now an argument could be made that DB should go into source, but I actually like having the database outside of the source because it kind of reminds me that the database is separate from our server. So I'm just going to do another think that should be correct. And then let's go to product. Okay. All right. So let's go to our package.json. A couple things we're going to update. So for our dev, instead of nodemon dot, we're going to do nodemon source server.js. And here it's going to be source server.js. And let's make sure everything's working. All right, so we do have some errors. So cannot find module ./dbconfig, and that is because it's no longer in this directory. So we need to back out one directory. And now this should work. Whoops, looks like I forgot something else. So I need my DB there. So what I'll do is I'm going to do a search all. So we're looking for this. I want to replace it with DB. Oh, I did that backwards, but let's copy this. So this is a replace all that we can do here. So it's searching for this, and then we're going to replace it all with this. Place. And success. Now, let's go ahead and run through some of our routes to make sure this is working. So let's try to register a new user. And again, I'm using Postman. Some of these routes I've already saved on here from a previous video. So let's try to add something with more random stuff. Cool. And we can see that it returns with our new registered user. Obviously, in production, you wouldn't want to be returning the password, especially unhashed. But we'll get to that soon enough. Okay, so I'm liking where this has gone. I like my new structure. Again, this is all personal preference. So however you want to structure your project is perfectly fine. But this is a kind of a new organizational thing that I like. So we're going to do another git add. We can just check to see what's been added. So some files renamed, and this was modified, the package.json. And actually, let's double check that our production build works. So if I say npm run, I'm actually going to change start to build. So if I say npm run build, looks like it's working. So we have to do git add again because I changed it. Then we need to commit. So I can say commit. And I want to follow my same naming pattern. I'm going to say issue. This is issue number 5. Restructuring project files. Okay. Very small changes, but so we've done our first step. Now we've done our second step. Now we're moving on to our third step. Okay. So I actually had to spend some time off screen on a separate project that I'm working on to figure out how to run tests on Express.js. And we are going to get into testing for Angular because that's actually what I've been doing at my new job. Is part of my new job is writing tests in Angular. So we are definitely going to go over that. But let's go ahead. And I'm going to make another directory called tests. So now we have our tests here. And we're going to do a couple things. So we have this user.js route that does a couple things for us. So it's got some CRUD operations. We have a create, read, update, and delete. So what I'm going to do inside my tests is I'm going to create a new file here. I'm going to call it user.test.js. So we go into here, you can see that a user.test.js was created. Now, in test-driven development, the whole idea is to write your tests before you actually write your method or route in our case. Now, we don't necessarily have that because these have already been written. So we are going to write new tests to make sure that each line of code here is working the way we want it to. So I'm going to start with the most basic thing. So I'm going to get a describe block in. So if you're not familiar with testing, I'll try to explain this as best I can. So, and other test frameworks are different, but the whole idea is you have this describe block to start out with. So you kind of say, okay, in my describe, what am I working with? So here I'm working with my user.test, my user routes, right? So I'm going to say API user. Now again, this is something that's completely dependent on your preference. So the first parameter is kind of like a title of what your describe is going to be about. So this is about my API user routes. Then it's some function. So I'm doing an arrow function here. And then this should be nested with other describe blocks. So the whole idea is for your file, like assuming that this was a class, you would start with your class name here, and then each describe inside of this would be a method. But for our case, they're going to be routes. So I'm saying here, in my first describe, we are going to test the register route. All right, so actually there's a couple things I'll have to do at the top, but we'll leave this describe for now because we just want to make sure our tests are working. So I'm going to say post because it's a post method, and let's go get the absolute route for this. It's going to be API user. I do not want to close this. So it's API user register, because if I look in here, getting a register. And this is also, again, it's following the same pattern. There's going to be a callback function. Now, like I mentioned, there is some things I'm going to have to do here. So this might not make sense right now, but basically what we're going to do is throughout these tests, we're going to be adding users to our database for some of these tests. And then we need to make sure that we can actually delete them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to store what users we're adding, and then at the end of our tests, I'll go through and delete them. So I'm going to say new users is equal to some array. And then down here, now there's 3 parts to a test, and again, I'm kind of new to this as well. So if there's anybody in the comment section that has a ton of experience with testing, feel free to give me some feedback. But from what I've gathered, there's kind of like this initialize section, then your act section where you call your method, and then this is your asserts or expected, depending on what you're working with, depending on what framework you're working with. So I don't have any of these yet. I'm going to ignore this step, and I just want to see first if this test file is even working. So I'm going to say assert dot is true, and I'm just going to put true here. So the whole idea is Mocha's going to come through here, and it's going to recognize these test files. So it's going to look for this tests directory whenever we set up our test here, our test command, and it's going to run through these describe blocks. Now actually I just realized I made a mistake. So I'm in this describe, but what I need to do is I need to say an it. So thinking about this at high level is that you have these describe blocks. At some point, you're going to find an it statement at the bottom. Now this is where the actual tests start to happen. So this is actually I've been learning some VS Code shortcuts on the side. So if I highlight this and if I hover over Alt key and hit the up arrow or down arrow, I can actually move code without having to copy and paste it. So kind of like with the describe block, you have to say what this is. And I should say it should return true. Now I'm saying it should return true because right now all I'm asserting is if true is true, which should be true. That kind of sounded weird when I said it out loud. But what we're going to do is we're going to write our little test script here. So we're going to go this one at a time. Now this is specific to Windows. Since I'm working on a Windows computer, you wouldn't necessarily have to write this in a Linux. I'm not sure about Mac. But what I want to do is for my environment that's actually going to be running this, I want to set debug to debug. Actually, I think that's a different package. I don't even need that. But I'm going to set my node environment to test, which might not even be necessary, but I'm going to do it anyways. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to tell Mocha, okay, I'm going to pass this reporter flag. I'm going to write the spec here. I want to exit. I'm going to set my default timeout to 10,000. And I'm telling it that it can find these tests in the test directory. I think the actual spec part, because I'm kind of wondering what that is exactly. Is it, I think I need to say spec here. If I put spec here, I think that's how Mocha is going to find that. Another little trick too with VS Code is that in here, I can tell it, oh, hey, I want you to run test. Now let's see what happens. See if I did this right. Yep. So would you look at that? I ran my first test on our Express server. So as you can see, let's just go through the flow really fast. So I found my first test file, which is user.spec.js. And it found this describe block, and you see the API user. And here's my route that I described here. And then there's my statement, should return true. What happens if I put false? If I put false, you would expect this to fail, right? Let's see what happens. Hey, would you look at that? We got our first fail. And so with test-driven development, you want to write code incrementally, and you want to see your tests fail and also pass. It's very important that you see both and not just one. So anyways, this is kind of a very small example, but like I said, there's some other things we need to add. So what I'm going to do here is, okay, so we need to actually start calling our method, because right now this test isn't really helpful and it's not doing anything. Not to mention, I'm going to put that back. Not to mention, there's no watcher on this, so I actually have to rerun that script every time we save, which is kind of annoying. So what I want to do instead of that is, now Mocha actually has a watcher that you can add, but I found out that it doesn't really work well with Express. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on this next line here, actually I want to move this down here, and we're going to put this comma here. So what I'm going to say is test watch, because we want it to set up to watch our directory. So whenever there's changes, we want it to update or rerun our server and rerun the tests. So I'm just going to copy and paste that down here. So again, setting my node environment to true, which is probably isn't necessary. So we want to run, actually we want to run Nodemon. So we're going to use Nodemon to watch our files again. Now I have to do the backslash double quote here so that I can say the literal character, because if I do that, it breaks out of the string, which I don't want. So backslash quote, say Mocha. Got our reporter again. These are spec files. I want it to exit when it's done, and I want to set my default timeout to 10,000, and it's going to be my tests directory. Looks right. And then I need to add my double quote again. It looks kind of weird, but it should work. So if I say npm run test watch, it should run my tests, then exit. Okay, so it ran my tests and then exited, which is what we wanted. Now you might be asking, what does this timeout mean exactly, Court? So by default, Mocha has a 2-second timeout for each it block. So whenever I was running this on my own on a separate project, I actually ran into issues where it was saying a test failed because it exceeded 2,000 milliseconds. So, oh, and that's 1,000. I want it to be 10,000, which is 10 seconds. So, ooh, and I have a typo here. I'm all over the place today. Anyways, so, yep, I'm setting my timeout to 10,000 seconds. I feel like that's comfortable for me. So what I'm going to do is we're going to try to run through this test quickly for this guy here. So what are we doing here? So we're creating a user from the body that comes in. And then we're trying to save this. And if there is a result, we want to return that to the user. And if there is an error, we want to catch that. And if we catch it, it goes to our server.js, to our universal error handler, prints out the stack trace to our console, and then it sends a 500 something broke. All right, so instead of saying should return true, we want to say should create user when required fields are passed through the body. So if I go to user.js, I need to kind of remind myself how I wrote this. So we have this as required, required, and unique, and also required. So what we want to do is in here, we want to set a user object here. So this is going to be some user, and they're going to be equal to something. So their first name is going to be, let's just do Court, and their last name is going to be Doe, and their email is going to be codingwithcourt@gmail.com, and their password is going to be the greatest password known in the universe, password. Okay, so now we got some user object created here, and that's our initialize. Now we need to do our actual act, and this is where Supertest comes in, because Supertest is actually going to be the one making the calls to our server. So this is kind of how Supertest works. So we're going to say constant, we're going to get a response object. So we need to await because this is async, so I'm going to add async here. So we're going to say request, which isn't here, but actually, it's kind of weird that this auto-completed to Express. I want this from Supertest. See if that works. Ooh, actually, do I really not get a build failure? JavaScript is weird sometimes. So I got this request here, and we want to do a dot post, but first it's a function. And I wonder why it's not showing me anything in here. What if I take this out? I'm suspicious about those curly braces. Yeah, that looks right. Okay. So I need to actually pass it my server. So let's go ahead and grab our server. So we're going to have our server here. We're going to require it. And it comes from our... we need to go back one. So our source and server, because request needs to know what the server is. So here's our server, and again, just reminder, it's all this code in here. We're doing a post method, so we got a post. Now we want to send it. Well, actually, first we have to tell it what our URL is. So it's API user register. And the body that we're going to be sending it, say .send. Now the user object is already a JSON, so I don't have to write this out. So I'm just going to say user. All right, looks good to me. So the next thing we're going to do is, okay, so we have our response. So what we want to do is we want to say assert dot equals. So we want to make sure the response dot status code is 200. Pretty simple, right? So let's go ahead and save this, and it's going to actually save set encoding. Oh, it should be send. What happened? Not sure what happened there. That's kind of weird. But before I save, because as soon as I save, it's going to run our code, I want to open up our database. I'm going to do this off screen. Sorry guys, give me 1 second to load our database. Log in with Google. The Atlas is trying to load as quickly as it can. Okay, so here's our cluster. Actually throw this to you guys. All right, so you can see here, this is actually test data. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. So it should be CodingWithCourt, collections. So we have our users, and there should be, see if we get anybody. It's been a while since I've looked at this. Again, I apologize for posting not on a regular basis. So I'm going to delete these just so we have everything fresh. And I'm sure there's a better way to delete multiple documents, but don't know off the top of my head. Okay, so we have 0 users. So let's go ahead and save this. All right, so we get a error, and it says app.address is not a function. And I'm not sure what line. It looks like that's in Supertest. So let's see if any users were added. Okay, so no users were added. So kind of wondering what happened here. So we have accidentally clicked on Steam. So we say await request, which is Supertest. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to think through this. We have a post method going to API user register. Maybe I need a slash here. I don't think so, but app.address is not a function. So we send a user object, and then we, okay, so let's even see if it's getting to this line here. I want to console.log the response. It's gonna be, it should be a huge object. Okay, so there's actually an error being thrown on this line. So there's something that I'm not doing right. I'm trying to figure out what that could be. Oh, I think I know what the problem is. I need to export our server. And it worked. Yep, just needed to export it. It just couldn't find our application. And there you go. You can see that a user object was created with a horrible password, and you would not want to do this in production. But I could do that today, but I want to just focus on test-driven development. So here's our module. We're exporting the app, which is what we need. And then over here, we are getting a status code of 200. But here's the thing. So if you think about this, if we get a status code 200, there is a chance that this result, I kind of don't like how I wrote this. So I think I might change how I wrote this, because I don't like how, just looking at this, it kind of bothers me. So I think I'm going to rewrite this little section here. Okay, so we're going to comment this out for a second. Now we should get a test fail because it's not returning anything. Ooh, so timeout of 2000. I wonder, should be 10,000, but looks like, yeah, anyways, test failed, which is kind of what we were looking for, but I want to change how I'm doing this. So I'm going to change this to an async function. Save that. It's going to break again. Now this doesn't, now keep in mind, this doesn't actually save in the database. It's this part that saves in the database. So what I want to do here, I want to do a try and catch, because this is a section of code that could exit with some error. Now this is personal preference. You can either use async or .then, .catch, and .finally. But again, it's kind of personal preference, up to you. So if there's an error, I just want to send in our error object. And instead of saying E, I'm going to say error, because that's exactly what that is. It's an error. Kind of want to be verbose with my variable names. So what I want to try to do is I want to say user.save. And I actually want to await that. So I'm going to call this saved user. Okay, so now if there's some error that occurs here or any section in this code, it's going to go into this catch. So if everything works out, I just want to send back the saved user. All right, so we get a status code of 500. Here's our error message, duplicate key error. So there's an email with a duplicate, which makes sense. So how do we get past that? And I'll show you a trick. So later on in my tests, I'm probably going to be creating more user objects. So why don't we create a helper function for us called create new user? So what I can do here is, I'm going to use a little trick. I can do my Alt up arrow key. I can do a return statement here. And so this is the part that needs to be unique. So what I want to do is I want to change this to an inline. I'm trying to remember what this is called. Maybe string interpolation. I usually just call this inline string, but if you guys know in the comment section exactly what this is called, I would like to know. So what I'm going to do we have moment? We do, I think. Let's go ahead and grab moment. Moment's going to help me out. I'm going to require moment. And I'm going to use this really handy dandy function called Unix. So it's going to return the Unix timestamp, which is just some long integer. So this should always be unique because it's going to be a new time. So now I can just say user is create new user. So now I should get a test pass. Cool. Now, not only do I want to ensure that the status code is 200, but I want to make sure I can actually grab the user from the database. So I can say constant saved user. Now, again, this is kind of going to blow my database because I'm not deleting the new users that I'm adding yet. But I'm going to say saved user is going to be, and this we actually need our model here. So user acquire. Whoops. So we want the database models user. I want to say user dot find by ID. Really find one. Now we know our email is unique. We can say email user dot email. Now what I want to do is I want to say assert dot save. Oh, I don't know why it capitalizes. Now I want to assert that the saved, I want to do a deep equal because I want to check both objects. I want to compare them. Do I have underscore in here? Yes, I do. So we're going to utilize underscore. So I'm going to say, I'm going to tell underscore what values I want to pick. Looks like it doesn't autocomplete. So I'm going to grab underscore and I want to pick, so from my saved user, I want to pick, and these are the properties I tell it by using an array. I can say I want my email, my password, my first name, and my last name is equal to user. And let's see if this deep equal works. Expected to deeply equal undefined. Oh, I did this wrong. So it needs to be like that. Let's try that again. Okay, so it looks like it's not able to find. Let's do a console.log of our saved user. Well, it's actually already showing us that this is empty, but without the pick, what does it look like? Whoa. So did it find any is the thing. So it's got a dot paths. So we want dot obj. Let's try that. Nope. Let's do some research for a second. So let's look up mongoose find one. It's weird that the object looks like that. Ah. Did I know how to wait? I did not. So it should still fail. But see, now it actually looks like an object. So I don't need this. And I don't need that. And we get a deep and we get a pass. So now I know the status code is 200, and now I know I can actually grab that user. But I actually want to make this test better, and the way I can do that is, at least for me, I know that signing up at least one user is working, but why don't I try multiple? So the way I can do that is I can create an array, do a dot for each. It's going to look weird at first, but the madness makes sense. So I have some user in here, and then I put my if block in there. So again, using my shortcuts, I can do that. And now all I need to do is just create new user. Control C this, and I can do new user and do 3. And now there's no initialize section. It's just my act and my assert. Ooh. So we get duplicate key. It's because I'm calling create new user at the same time. How can I change this? This might not be necessary, but I could do like a counter. And I could set this equal to 0 by default. And I can just add a counter here. So here I can just, it might not be the best practice, but I just want to get past this. Yep, so I verified that I'm able to insert 3 new users into our database. Now we actually want to do some cleanup. So there's this block called after each. So after all of these tests, it'll come into this after each. So it takes in a function. And all I want to do is pull up the delete many. And let's see how to use this. Seems simple enough. So let's do we don't really need to do async here, but just to kind of stay intact with this here, we also need to do a try and catch here, since we are calling things that can fail. I have some error. Just say well, nope. They can assert dot throw so some function which I don't want it to do anything, but I want to say could not. Ooh, I actually want to print out the error. Actually I do need my initialize, so I need a response and a saved user. Just like that. And this should pass. Yep, I'm adding a bunch of users. So what I want to do is this wouldn't be ideal, but I could come in here and just say delete many. Not pass anything, it'll delete my whole collection. But what happens if a developer that's working on my team accidentally runs a test watch or a test? It's going to delete everything. And if this was connected to our production database, it would delete everything. So what I want to do instead is I want to Again, I'm just using this try and catch here because I'm trying to follow in sync with the rest of my async methods I'm doing in this project. So another error. I can wait. So what I want to do, this is an underscore thing. If we go back to our documentation here, it's an object. So delete many. Is there like a delete many by ID? Let's go look. Okay. Okay. So I can say delete many ID in and then some array. Yep. Wonder why ID. So it looks kind of funky. Sorry guys, I haven't used this before. Okay, so it's not too bad. So what we want to do is we want to do a pluck from new users, and we want to get their ID. Pluck's a underscore function. I would advise to read their documentation if you're unsure what this does, but all this is going to do is it's going to go through this list, this object list here, and grab all their IDs. Anyways, so we're going to try to delete everything, and I'm going to add a to-do here for me, and I'm going to put my task here. So to do list all, or really I want to log this with an actual logger, but for now I'm just going to show the error. Oh, did that actually work? I didn't even think about that. Okay, so we have a total of 18 users. So if I hit save and this runs, I should still only have 18 users. And we have 20. Oh, duh. Wait a minute. If I created 3 new users, never mind. So don't know how that worked. What I want to do is here, I want to say new users dot push saved user. Okay, so there were 20. So now there should still be 20. Sweet. Nice. So it looks like this little section's working here. Cool. So this function has some new code coverage. Now, before I sign off here, before I sign off here, I know in our task we said we are going to add test coverage to existing routes, but I kind of want to keep my videos a bit shorter, and I can do this kind of stuff off screen for these other tests because they all seem to be kind of the same. I mean, I guess what we could do is I could finish this one up and then we can do another one, and that'll give you guys 2 examples to go off of. And another thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, my repositories are now public, so you all can come in and look at my code, and kind of reference that if you need any help, which is great. So before I go, I want to do another it block here because I want to make sure if I send in users, a user object to the body, that is missing one of our required fields, we're going to get an error, because that's what we should get, right? So again, this is kind of part of our test coverage, but I'm going to do another for each here. And I'm going to do something that might look a little crazy. So I'm going to do this omit thing and another underscore thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new user. In this example, I'm going to omit the email. Here's another trick that you guys can do in VS Code. If I hold Alt Shift and use one of the arrow keys, I can copy lines. So on one, I'm going to omit the email. Another one, I'm going to omit the password, first name, last name. So this here ensures that if I'm missing any of my required fields, there should be some kind of error. And then for these, I can actually get rid of these because I don't need them. We're going to do an empty object, null, or undefined. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say it should return status 500 when required user fields are missing. Makes sense, right? I hope. So again, I'm new to testing, so if anybody's watching this video and they're an expert on testing and you'd like to give me feedback, I'd highly recommend that. I would really appreciate it. All right, so again, we have our act. And it's not necessary to write this, but I just want you guys to visualize this. So we have our initialize, our act, which is our method call, and then we also have our assert or expected. All right, so this kind of covers our initialization, and there should be bad user. All right, so we're going to say request.post. And it might not be a bad idea to come over here and say constant routes is equal to, and then I could say this is register user. So, and then down here, I can say routes dot register user. Not something that's necessary, but I figured it's better doing that than typing this all out one by one. We're going to await this. We're going to grab a response from it. And we are going to say wait a minute. Aha, forgot this here. Bad court. Okay. So we're going to send it our bad user. And what I want to do is I want to assert that this is going to give us, so this is what the actual value is. So this should be response.status. How come it's not? Okay, so let response, because I'll have it try and catch block later. So dot status code is equal to 500. This should return true. Ooh. All right, so this is kind of hard to read, so I'm gonna full screen that. So actually they all failed. of type object or string received undefined. Oh, duh. Okay. One other thing I'd like to show you. Let's hit save and make sure all of our tests pass. Ooh. Oh. Is it because I'm console.logging? Yep. Instead of console.logging, let's do a to-do log with Winston, which is an error logger that we will use later. Cool. All right. Okay, so all these are failing, which is great. Or these are not being saved to the database, which is great. There is a way to improve this test. So let's say, for example, I don't use next, and I just, if I was a different developer, and I said status 500, and is that? No, it's not. And I just give it a JSON of our error object. Passes, right? Well, I want you to think for a moment why I don't want to do this and why I want to use next instead. All right, hope that gave you enough time to think about it. But if I don't use next, I don't go to my universal error handler, right? Not to mention, when I send this back to the server, whoever this developer is that wrote this code, they're sending the error object. And I don't want a malicious user to be able to see my error object. I don't want them to know what my system is. Because if Mongo was to break, it would send some information about my database, and I don't want to do that. So I want to enforce the developer to have to use next error. So how can I ensure that that happens in this test? Well, what I can do for starters is I can say, okay, I want to ensure that the response dot, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Is it, I think it might be body dot, I'm trying to remember what it's called. I accidentally clicked on Steam. Go away. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I don't remember what it's called, but what we can do is in here, I'm going to console.log response.body. See what happens. We want to check this message here. So if I say .body.message, we should just get a bunch of strings. All right. So what I want to do is I want to make sure the response.message is equal to something broke. Would you look at that? Now we're getting errors because I am sending a status of 500, but I'm not sending the right response. I want the response to be something broke. So I go to the server.js, we are sending something broke. So if I delete this line there, uncomment that one and save it, I should get test passed. And I don't because it's undefined. And that's probably because response.body.message doesn't exist. But what about response? What's in there? That is a huge object. So I want to grab my message. Where's my message? Something. Send the dot error dot text. Dot error dot text. This should pass. All right, now you might be wondering, okay, well, this is all great. I'm running my tests. They're passing. But what if I had 100 of test files and this process takes much longer? I don't want to have to sit here and wait until my tests are finished. What I can do is I can say a dot only on this describe, on any describe or it, and it will only run that one. So if I come down here and say it dot only, it's only going to run these, which is nice. Let's comment this out. Let's remove that. And all of our tests are passing. Okay, so I think this is a good place to stop for now, because this to me looks great. It's going to take me some time to finish out this issue because we want to add test coverage for our existing routes. And that is going to take me a bit to do because we got 3 other functions here. And then I also have this these product routes here that are, again, doing CRUD operations. And I want to make sure all my routes are tested and that they're secure. So I think this is a good place to stop this video. So again, I'm going to continue with this, but before I end this video, I want to make sure we go through our Devops operations. So typically I do all of this on the UI. I apologize, not on the UI, but on the terminal, but we'll try it on the UI so you guys can see it too. So I'm going to add all of these here. And let's just for a moment go over our tests or all of our changes. And it's very important that we don't have a only here on our test files. So that's something you should always check before pushing your code. Because if you have any continuous integration on your development stack, you don't want to break it by having a dot only. You want to run all your tests. So everything was added. Let's go ahead and add our message. So I'm going to say issue, this is number 5. Adding test coverage to /API/user/register post. Now, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I believe this is so far a good start to test coverage with this guy here. I feel pretty comfortable with that. I think the next thing I would add is to this describe is to make sure that the password is actually hashed and not just some random string. We want to make sure bcrypt is being called there, which we haven't gotten to that part yet, but I plan to get that part in with the next video. And I know some of my Angular developers out there, they're probably itching for me to get back to the Angular side, and I promise you guys I will, but I want to finish up this section with user authentication, which should be done soon. And again, I want to try to get on a schedule for posting new videos. I feel like I'm comfortable with my new job now, so I should be back in the game. Anyways, guys, I think this is going to be the end of our episode covering TDD on Express. And again, we will cover this in Angular. If this video helped you guys out in any way, please like and subscribe. It'll really help out my channel and get me out there on the web. I really appreciate you guys sticking out through this video, and hopefully you guys learned something today. And before I let you go, I forgot to complete our DevOps. Let's check our status here. So we're on a clean branch, and that's because it's local. Well, let's get this guy pushed to GitHub. And all right, it's pushed. Let's do something here. Now this is by no means ready to be pushed into master, but I am going to add this here. So I have no reviewers because it's just me. Assign this to myself. I want to create a new label. I'm gonna call this work in progress. Looks like I've already done this for a different video project. Let's see. That color's okay to me. I like pink. I'll create this label. And I lost my title. Typically for my title, oh, there it is. Typically for my titles, I like to just keep it the name of the branch. I'm gonna assign this to myself. It's a work in progress. This is a reminder to me not to push this guy. Initial release, sure, could be a part of that. And no comments. My code comments are good enough for me for now. Let's create this pull request. Do we actually have a dev branch? Ooh, we don't. That might be something we want to do. Well, let's go check out my project. So this is in progress, but I want to add my issue here. So I want to link this to this pull request, and this is a part of our initial release. This is assigned to me. And again, guys, I cannot stress how important it is to have good DevOps. And if you are doing any personal projects or work for a small company, GitHub is amazing for this, especially because it's free. So this is actually in progress. And this is also waiting to be reviewed by nobody because it's just me. But anyways, guys, I think this is going to be the end of our video, and I'll probably come through here and clean up these branches. But again, I apologize for my dogs if you heard them, but this is going to be the end of our... I apologize if you heard my dogs, but this is going to be the end of this episode. And if you have any questions, guys, please drop them in the comment section, or you can email me at codingwithcourt@gmail.com. Any questions that you have, I will be happy to answer them. And if you guys have any ideas or code you specifically want me to cover, feel free to leave me some feedback in the comment section, and we can discuss if that's something I'll be happy to show. But anyways, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.